Hey guys, this is Conway with the Grieving with Gratitude podcast. I'm so excited to have Becky Aste on. She and I connected via Instagram. She is a trauma-informed coach and specializes in marriage and relationship trauma coaching. She equips ambitious wives to repair thriving connection into their relationships by moving trauma out of the body. After spending a decade researching and going through every mainstream modality of healing to save her marriage, she found herself 2 kids later, separated and on the verge of divorce. At the final hour, she stumbled upon an unconventional game changer that took her marriage from dying to thriving in just 6 months and has made it her mission to get this into the hands of every woman possible ever since. Whether it's betrayal, addiction, or abandonment, abuse, neglect, grief, or something else we've survived, our body keeps the score and can become an unconscious emotional block to the connection in our marriage. And Becky gets to work with you to clear those blocks out. It was such a powerful conversation that we had together. And it's just so fun to be able to talk about trauma information and how we all process it and we all heal from it in different ways, and that there's so many modalities, and that it doesn't have to be something that defines our life, but is merely something that becomes our triumph. So enjoy this episode. Hi guys, welcome to the Grieving with Gratitude podcast. I'm with Becky Aste. She is with Breakthrough. She's an amazing, amazing person. And I'm just so excited. We connected on Instagram. And she does everything around relationships, which we were talking about. Just grief isn't really, grief isn't just death. Like, we experience grief in different levels throughout every area of our lives. So even like when you lose a job, or, a breakup is definitely, like, especially when I lost my dad, a lot of girls didn't know really how to talk about it to me. And they were really hesitant to be like, is it like having the most gnarly breakup ever? And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like, right? It's like the most gnarly breakup times 100 that you could experience. And so I'm so excited to talk to you about all things relationships, because I just broke up with someone too. So like then we got all the things to talk about. But I'd rather you just kind of share your take on what you do, because you'll explain it better than I can. And yeah, we can go from there.
I'm so excited just to, be in your space because we talk on Instagram, but getting to meet you now, just thanks for having me in your space. And yeah, I'm Becky. I'm a trauma informed marriage coach, not because I've just killed the marriage game for all of these years, but it was pretty much the opposite. We got married really young. When I was 21, he was 23, so we were babies. And pretty early on, I could see this toxic dance like forming, which I didn't have words for at the time. At the time, I would just call it chase and run, where I would chase and he would run. And then, as I got more into healing and trying to figure out how to fix basically what felt really off and broken with us when it was off. When we were good, we were good. But when we weren't, it was like, what is this? Like, are we even going to last? As I picked up more words, it was like codependency and addiction became words that we resonated with. And then, anxious attachment style, avoidant attachment style. I learned all this stuff along, our 10-year marriage. We've been married almost 12 years now, but 10 years in, we had done everything like couples counseling, therapy, books, podcasts, talking our friends' ears off to the point, where they're like, okay, I'm done hearing about this. EMDR, like all the things. And it only led to us still spinning our wheels. We ended up separating, and we're looking into like the cost and legal steps of divorce. And that's when I stumbled upon, it was a coach on Instagram, and she ran a program that taught women how to repair connection in their marriage by moving trauma out of the body. And it was the one thing that I hadn't really tried. I realized I had tried a lot of things that kept me kind of stuck in my head, and I learned a lot of information, but all the like modalities I was tapping into were really just from the neck up. And when I learned that the body keeps the score of the trauma that we've been through, it clicked like, okay. So if the body is like holding all of this stuff I've survived and is like screaming at me in different ways through different symptoms that I'm experiencing, like anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, eczema outbreaks, yada, yada. I guess we got to go into the body to move it out. Never really thought of that. It's not like the way our world talks about healing. Our world just says go to couples counseling and that should fix you. And so that was the, game changer for us. It was this like last minute buzzer beater game changer that took our dead marriage, to a place where it was okay, we can survive this, and then moving on to thriving and connected and repaired. And, that's not to say that every story, like a success story, doesn't equal repairing with the same person. For some people, it's being able to heal and move on into separation and finding like a much better match. But either way, I'm just so grateful for the healing that I was able to experience, because I'll say, even at this point, like, so grateful we were able to make it, and that I've got my husband, and that we are at a place that I never thought we could be. But even if it didn't turn out that way, like, this kind of healing really saved my life.
That's awesome. Okay, so what is it that so I'm trained in the E4 trauma method. So it's like
Mhm.
you like relive the trauma basically to like negate the emotions, because you
Mhm.
like when we rationalize things too much, we get in this like that's why like talk therapy sometimes doesn't really work, because you just keep re-energizing the same shit over and over and
Yep.
over again, but you're not really getting it like out. So like what does
Mhm.
it look like to have a session with you?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Like, I felt the same thing. I experienced it. A lot of women is through traditional talk therapy. It's like, why am I still stuck and reliving it? And it makes sense when you learn, like, oh, you're literally just like deepening these circuits in your brain and all of these stories that are keeping you stuck. And so just to share even like an example of what a session with me would look like, I just want to like backpedal for a second and kind of geek out, to help the listener understand. Like, we've all got this vagus nerve that runs, it's the big kahuna nerve that runs from the base of our skull down to the bottom of our spine. And it's constantly sending messages, neurotransmitters up and down our spine, from our brain to our body to our brain. And only 20% of these messages go from our brain to our body. And then 80% go from our body to our brain. So it's that whole idea of you got to get into the body to like move and shift, get trauma out, rewire. And so it's not that all the head stuff is not important. It's obviously we have to talk, through
Mhm.
things to understand each other. And I love podcasts and I read books, but you're going to feel like a salmon swimming upstream. And so a lot of it is just breaking circuits and interrupting patterns. And so if we're talking about, a situation where a woman is super triggered by seeing the text message go off in her husband's phone. Let's say they've been through infidelity, and every time the little ding goes off, she notices panic, she notices wanting to like scour through his search history. This was totally me. It's just like an easy loop to go down, a slippery slope, but it can end up making you feel crazy. And so if that's what she wants to interrupt, it's learning to pattern interrupt in that moment. And so we'll explore some tools of how she can do that. And just one example, just to make it tangible, is you could call in a grounding technique that's really popular, the five senses. So in that moment, your body is basically saying, danger, danger. It's trying to protect you. And so it's, up to you to teach it. Like, I'm actually safe right now. And so we got to get out of our head, which is going into ruminating land, and back into our body. So naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can physically touch, 3 things you can, or 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, is just one example of many different grounding techniques to help you go from that alert, activated nervous system into, okay, like, I'm safe, I'm back in my body. You know, we're going to survive this.
Yeah, it's just like breaking that pattern, because like we start, especially with like information overload, like we have all these like codependency, you were naming it, and like ancient anxious attachment. Like we have all these
Mhm.
like key words that everyone talks about, and then it's like you become this Instagram like healer from memes, like we know so much stuff, but like how do you implement it into your life? Just because you know codependency, like
Yeah.
it's like a key word, but like what does that actually
Yeah.
really mean? Like we
Yeah.
all are codependent, like every single person is, like to some degree. And like that's who we are as like people. It's just like to what degree are we codependent or anxious attachment styles? You're like, okay, so you know that about yourself, but like what's the point? Like what do
Yeah,
you do with that information afterwards? Like
exactly.
it's so heady.
It's so heady and it's frustrating as hell because it's like you think I know better, therefore I should do better. And it's not the case, like we know a ton, I hope I can swear on this podcast of
Oh, you can.
stuff. Okay. And yet, like, just look at our society, look at how much depression is, rampant, how much anxiety, and prescription pills have, skyrocketed. Divorce rate is obviously, very high. And so it's not for a lack of knowledge. We've got a ton of knowledge. I totally agree with you. It's like learning to embody it and integrate it is really where the magic's at.
Yeah, totally. Because like it's great to be able to label it, right? It's great to know that. But like even I work with clients and like it's almost like the more they know, it's like the harder it is to heal because
Mm,
it's like, well, I know I'm this way. You're like, okay, but like what do you want to create? Like this
mm,
isn't serving you anymore. So it's great to know what it is and like point it out. But like, what do you want to do next? Like
mm,
so
mhm.
like some of us, like, I don't know, like people just get overwhelmed. It's like, well, I'm all these things. It's like, well, you don't have to be all those things if you don't want to. You have
Yeah.
the freedom to change. And then you're able to like move the energy outside of it. So it's like the first step is being self-aware, which is great. But like
Mhm.
you can't just be like, oh, I'm an anxious attachment codependent and I'm just gonna sit on this hill. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's not gonna be a very fun hill to sit on for very long.
I totally agree. I've like been thinking about this a lot lately because yeah, exactly what you said. Labels can serve its purpose. I think they can be helpful if it's going to help you step into this like expansion, right? And growth. But sometimes, yeah, we can die on the hill of our labels and just like let it become this box that limits us. And I think words are powerful too. So especially with our identity, if we're like, I'm codependent, I'm codependent, I'm codependent, like year after year, like, guess what you're going to keep being, like, if,
Yeah, and so it is. Like you just literally manifested that for you. Like
yeah,
you're creating that reality for yourself. Like I don't want that reality. Like I like knowing like I can lean that way, but I don't want to be that way,
yeah,
like at all. It's like so I love that more people are getting interested in their own self-awareness, which is so huge, and getting in touch with being able to know that they can actually produce really long-standing change in their behavior, like through the senses, like being able to, you know, get outside of yourself and into the present moment,
hmm,
so it's not so triggering every time. Because I always say triggers too are like not bad things. Like triggers can be really great opportunities for growth and learning, right? Like if you're being triggered by something that's not something that you should always avoid, I think it's something you can kind of go, oh, here's something I need to lean into to get healing and not just
yeah,
run away from it.
I
What
love that. Hmm.
what do you kind of feel like with your clients, like are some of the biggest things that you've kind of been encountering within relationships that are like really common?
Mm. With the type of women, and it's like, it's funny. We end up working, I think a lot of us with clients that are a lot like us. It's just like we attract kind of who we
Your
are.
vibe attracts your tribe.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of the women that I work with are just really ambitious, like high achievers. If you're into the Enneagram, like a lot of type threes, but can use that as just kind of a coping mechanism for the disconnection in their marriage. And so a lot of us are trying to soothe the pain or just find a place of, hey, I'm successful in this one area, like if it's our work or our job or whatever feels like an area that they can achieve something. It's a common coping mechanism. And a lot of us are that, if we're throwing out the label anxious attached. And so it is the deep fear of abandonment, the deep fear of conflict and disconnection with their husband, the constantly like checking on his facial expressions, his behavior, his tone, to see like, are we good right now? Just really, really high anxiety, but high performing. So it's easy to think like, I'm okay because on the outside, I'm getting things done. Like I'm not stuck inside, just hiding under a blanket, but learning that like this is just the way that we're coping with our discomfort.
Yeah, I would say that I'm very much all those things.
I knew we vibed.
Yeah, that is who I am. So what for you personally, if you and I are the same, like what was your biggest, like obviously you guys were at your end of the road where like it was make it or break
Mhm.
it. So you went into starting to do this process. Like how was it having your partner on board with it? Like
Mhm.
what did that look? Because like I know a lot of women like we know that there's something wrong, so we're like in it to win it. But like
Mhm.
how was it for you with your husband?
Such a good question. So the program that I did, it was just for women. And I was at this point where I really thought that I mean, I guess I had like a thread of hope left. I'm like, I guess technically it's possible. Like, we haven't signed the divorce papers, but I really felt like we've tried everything. And I, at least, if this doesn't work for our marriage, want to heal myself. But it was just me doing the work. I didn't even tell my husband. That was the first time I invested like a large amount of money in a program and didn't even run it by him. I was like, I don't care. Like, I feel like I need
Yeah.
this. I'm going
You're
to do
like,
it.
if I'm gonna be on my own anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I did the work on my own and I didn't even tell him right away. And a lot of it was just kind of quietly working behind the scenes. I did end up mentioning it to him, and he was basically, he's a very skeptical person, especially like, really, you met a stranger online and you invested how much, and good luck. I hope it works. Like, thanks. I need all the luck I can get. I don't know. We'll see. But he started to notice the changes. And if you were to ask him today, what shifted kind of the toxic dance and ended up translating over to a repaired connection with him as well, was he noticed a different energy. And he noticed that for the first time, really since meeting me, like, I had this grounded energy about me that communicated to him, like, wow, she's really got herself. Like, she can stand on her own 2 feet. She's not going to be collapsed if I don't respond in a certain way, or if I say this, speak this certain truth, like, she's going to be able to hold her own. So it wasn't really even a different thing I was saying. It was like the way I was carrying myself. It was my body language. It was that vibrational energy, that he sensed. And so he started to feel safer speaking honestly to me. And we started to have like the most authentic conversations that we'd ever had in our marriage, which normally would have sent me for a tailspin. Like, you've thought about, like, being with another woman or like divorcing me, that would be like death to me because of the
Mhm.
abandonment I had been through. So learning to heal that and like hear his truth and still hold my ground was able to open the door up to, yeah, some of the most authentic healing conversations.
I love that. I was doing a podcast before this and I was like just doing like a life update and I broke up with someone and I've been going through like I feel like within the spiritual community we're always like told to be like maintain completely neutrality, and like especially if you're going through codependency is wishing people places or things were different than they are. That's what's causing like upset and then we get this attachment to it because we're like, well, why can't this person just be how I want them to be? And you like don't see them through the lens that they actually are.
Mm.
And so as I was like really talking about it, I feel like within spirituality, like trying to maintain that neutrality, because sometimes do you experience this? This is just a question. Like we can be grounded, but sometimes the person's just not a good fit,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
have to walk away from it. And I felt like I was going crazy because I was like doing these like coaching sessions or seeing people on coaching sessions. And we all have to reach our own aha moments, right? Like, because you can't tell someone like you have to break up with that person. They're not
Yeah.
good for you. They have to come to that realization. But I felt like trying to within the spiritual community, like trying to be so neutral to things and like I accept them how they are. And I'm just, like it was like
Yeah.
a brain thing for like,
Yeah.
well, at least for me, like where I was like, okay, I have to accept them. And I'm like, this is just not working. And like, I felt like almost bad being like,
Yeah.
this isn't working. I still love you, but like, this is, I can try to rationalize this all I want and like be neutral, but like, I am miserable.
Yeah, 100%. It's so relatable what you're saying. And what what resonates with that with me is like I was so back and forth for honestly like 8 years out of our marriage, was like, should I stay? Should I go? I tortured myself with that question and was so indecisive. Because it is that, yeah, duality of me trying to be neutral, of like, let me accept him for who he is, but how do I know if it's like that's what I need to do, or this is just not an aligned fit for me? Like, this is just totally a lack of resonance with my core values and who I am. And I wasn't able to answer that question for so freaking long. And I remember sitting across the screen from this woman, the coach that I was looking into, and telling her all of this. And I remember she just smiled with this piece about her, like this confidence. And she was like, you'll have total clarity in 8 weeks, which was the length of her program. And I was almost offended by it. I was like, woman, did you not hear what I just told you? I've tried it all. Like, I've been this way for years, and you think your little 8-week program is going to bring me clarity. But it was the only thing that like taught me to calm down my nervous system enough, clear out the shit from that my body was keeping the score of, so that I could like really tune in and learn how to trust my gut in the first place. Like, I had the totally corroded sense of connection with my intuition because of years of psychological, spiritual abuse, like taught to not trust yourself, right? Or your
Mm-hmm.
feelings. And so it was like being able to come to a place where I did have clarity. And for some women, it is like, this is not a fucking fit. And for others, it is, for me, it was a surprise. I thought that that was the clarity I'd get, like, oh, I'm all healed now and I'm finally going to have the balls to leave. And it was the opposite of like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to trust that this is what I want and that I actually do feel safe here. But I wasn't able to see it until, the work.
Yeah, it's like the cool girl thing. Like we all want to be like the cool girl. Like, oh, it's okay. And like, sometimes it's not okay. And it's okay for you
Mhm.
to say it's not okay. And like, I just think that it's like dating, like the whole dating culture. Like you gotta be the cool girl or whatever. It's like, no, like you're okay to be like,
Yeah.
this doesn't serve me. Like, and show up authentically who you are. Like that was like my biggest takeaway was like just being able to acknowledge like you don't have to compromise on things. Like you can be 100% who you are. And like that's the opportunity, especially in dating, because dating's a choice, right? Like we're choosing a partner and like you can
Yeah.
choose what you like and what you don't like. But yeah, I feel you on the like the last thing that you like really expected your outcome was gonna be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it was 8 weeks, and then you just had this full it was this transformation basically.
Well, it's funny because I remember getting to the 8th week in the program and feeling so much anxiety because I was like, this is the week she said that, like, I'm picturing like the clouds are gonna open, what's gonna happen.
You're like a
And
rainbow comes out
oh,
and
exactly. I drive by and this billboard is like, you are meant to stay. That's what I wanted. Um, but I think it was me even having a breakthrough that week of telling her, like, I still don't feel clarity right now. And her, like, being able to coach me through that and understand how much of me even wanting the clouds to open up and all of that, like, is so much a part of my old conditioning, and like helping me move through that. It was in the next couple of weeks actually that I felt like I remember having just kind of this moment at the table with my husband and talking to him, and we were having one of those like really honest talks. And for the first time, instead of trying to read his facial expressions and his body language and like try to figure out, is he really telling me the truth, I tuned into my body and was like, how does my body feel right now as he's speaking? Okay, my muscles are actually relaxed. My breathing is opened. Like, I feel safe. And this is what I can trust. Not the words coming out of his mouth, not his body language, yada, yada, but how my body won't lie to me. And so this is the clarity that I have right now, at least, that like, wow, I do want to heal with him. Like, I want this to continue.
dude, I love that. So it literally just came from you.
Yeah. Not I was looking for it in him for so long, and it was like, "Oh, I can learn to listen to my body. This is like a superpower I didn't even know I was sitting on."
But it's a superpower we all have,
Mhm.
which is wild. And it just came from something so simple, like we all inherently have it, like babies have it. Like that's
Mhm.
why babies don't vibe with certain people. And it's not for any reason other than like they're just trusting their intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't rationalize it away as to like being like, well, I should because it'll make him feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So what did you feel like is like with your clients, like what have been some of the biggest ahas for them out of just having different practices?
Mm. I think you know, finding them again. You even bring up kids, like, so much of this process is learning to come back to our core essence, like who we were before all of the trauma and all of the conditioning and all of the, kind of different masks and suits we've put on, is finding like this is really who I am at my core. And so it's just this massively powering aha experience of like, oh, this is me and this is what I stand for and value. And this is where my voice has been. And I'm going to start speaking it and practicing it in safe spaces before I have the balls to speak it to my husband, whatever the case is. But I think that's a massive one of they go in, wanting to save their marriage and then come out finding like, ah, wow, it was like really, it sounds really cliche, but it was me that I had to save. Um, and so that, and then I think another of many I could mention is just like learning to play again, learning like we don't have to just put life on pause for the next 2 years and just muscle down and heal and be all serious about it. Like there can also be beauty in life right now as we're a messy healing work in progress, and we can laugh and we can play and we can, be on the ground with our kids and we can have fun. A lot of the women that I work with, they've just gotten so solid and serious because of what we've been through. So it's learning like, okay, wow, life can actually be enjoyed while I'm still working on things as we go.
Dude, I love that. That's what I was like. I've noticed that like not a lot of people laugh in the spiritual community. There's so much to laugh about. Like life is funny and like
Yeah.
how things show up and get tweaked and like the aha moments, like they're funny. Like,
Mm.
and even some of like the things that like, even like listing off like, oh, what can you taste right now? Like that's hilarious. Like if you think about it, like you have to go back to like, oh, I don't know how to taste. Like that's crazy, Like I think it's the whole thing is so everything we go through is so funny. And it's like, and it's not funny in like a, oh, let's make fun of it. It's like in a way, like it doesn't have to be so serious. Like
Yeah.
life was meant to be lived on purpose. Like life and everything that we've had happen to us has created us in this moment of time for us to heal from and grow from and help other people and evolve. So like, why not? I don't think God like made us to just be miserable. Like get through life and like here's all
Yeah.
this trauma and like it's gonna suck getting through it. Like it's funny.
I love that.
Uh, how did you, because obviously when you're doing this, like yes, it was you went into it for your relationship with your marriage, but how did it outplay and picture with your friendships, like with
Mhm.
raising your kids? Like, how has that been looking like now that you have all these skill sets?
That was the unexpected part. I started to see it trickle into healing money wounds, trickle into my parenting, healing some spiritual wounds, um, into my business. Like it completely changed the course of my career path after going through this. And so, most obvious with parenting, like you said, how hilarious it is. Like we're grown adults, like responsible humans, with like lives, and we're learning how to get in touch with our sense of taste, like exactly that. It's almost so ridiculous. What ends up being the key for so many people is these just like basic kindergarten stuff. And so I started practicing it with my kids. The stuff that I've learned and that I've taught my clients is stuff that my kids can understand. So even just like navigating their tantrums is so much different. Like the five senses is one example. You can be like, Ollie, stop, name five things you see, four things, and you start to see them like shift into that parasympathetic nervous system, that like safe state, and not losing their mind. And so parenting and then all of the nervous system work, like, yeah, just learning that the same things that I learned in my relationship translates to my relationship with money. Like that was a huge aha moment for me, like seeing that, learning that money is a relational energy as well. And I had this blueprint of all the things that I had survived and that my
Mhm.
body had kept track of for years when it comes to my upper limits of what I think I'm worth, or um, what I believe about money is never really going to stay because, I know how to make it, but it's going to continue to flee just because of what I had experienced my whole life growing up. So it completely trickles, I mean, into everything.
Oh, 100%. Like, I think money, I always like talking about money, and like, because money is like such a trigger point for every single person, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's harder to talk about relationships with people because people like we said, like they rationalize so much stuff around it. And we pack so many things and meanings around things. So it's really hard to break apart those. But money is like something most people kind of struggle with. And it's this like inanimate object that we struggle with. But there was this, I like to like walk people through, what would you tell money if you had an opportunity and it was a physical thing, like a person sitting in front of you, what would
Hmm.
you tell it? And for me, my first thing was like, I'm sorry. I am
Yeah.
sorry I have not treated you very well. I've treated you like your consumable item. Like, if it was a person, would I treat it that way? No. And it's like
Hmm.
everything is energy. So if everything is made up of energy, then there's not anything that's better or greater than something else, right? Like, it's all an ecosystem and partnership connecting with each other, right? So
Hmm.
like that was a huge takeaway. So it totally makes sense that it would obviously help your relationship with money, and it would help your relationship in every area. Like, it would help your relationship with food, like getting in touch with your senses,
Hmm.
like just that basic connection to like what is happening right now without any of the thoughts or questions or whys behind it. Like, what is it that you're actually feeling?
Yeah, I love that question of, if you could say anything, what would you say to money right now? Because you can check in with that like for the rest of your life, just as like a little checkpoint, because it'll change over time. That's awesome.
Yeah, because you could be like, oh, thank you. Or you'll be like, I'm really sorry I bought all this stuff I didn't
So
need.
sorry.
I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you more.
Exactly.
Um, that this is just like such an amazing topic to talk about. And so you lost your dad also when you were 18, and was he 57? I lost mine when he was
Yeah.
56, and he was in,
Oh,
yeah, so very close. I mean, they were way too young and very unexpected. How have you kind of seen this help you with going through that grieving process? Because I'm sure it still comes up at points for you. I mean, it
mhm.
never goes away,
Yeah.
like it just doesn't happen as frequently, right?
Right.
Sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, he died of a heart attack suddenly. I don't know how you lost your dad. Um,
He had viral pneumonia, so it was sudden as well.
mm,
Like, I saw him the day before, and then I got
mm-mm.
that, like, 5:30 phone call to go to the hospital.
And were you
So
close
very
to him?
super, super close. So he was my
Mhm.
only parent. So
Mm,
yeah, so I'd see him like every day. So super wild, very codependent. It was a very
mhm.
codependent relationship. We did not have healthy boundaries. And he definitely enabled me because I was a druggy partier. So that's part of like the whole story of like him dying was such a like it was weird because it was like I would never consider his death a blessing by any means, but I was very blessed through the process, right? Because it
Mm,
was like, oh, I got to get my shit together. Like, and
mhm.
that was what catapulted me into starting the podcast and really creating this space for people. Because when I lost him, like, hey, you don't have a like you experience, you don't have a lot of friends to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you start becoming friends with your parents, that's very different. You either
Yeah.
lose them when they're like young, you didn't really remember them. That's like what I encountered, or really old, and on top of it, losing them suddenly is even rarer for
Yeah.
us because there's no real closure.
Yeah. And how long ago was that?
It was 4 years ago for
Oh,
me.
so still so recent. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 2007 for me. So how many years ago was that now? It's like 15. I had just graduated high school, and yeah, like none of my friends had lost a parent yet, and no closure, so sudden, like almost couldn't believe it. I remember, I kind of regret this now, but I remember coming home um after my dad's death. Maybe it was like a year after, and my mom had like a picture from the morgue. And because I was still so like, I can't even believe this happened. Like, it feels like he just went on a trip and he never said bye. I asked to see it. And then, yeah, I don't recommend that. That was awful.
Oh,
Yeah. But at the same time, it was like, okay, this really actually happened. But it's just these weird things we go through with grief. Like, everyone's grief, like, it makes you do weird stuff, and think weird things. And I was like, this is hard for me to even connect right now that this is reality. Um, but it was interesting because connecting to how this healing has like helped heal on another level that like deep wound of abandonment, because that's what it feels like for me. It's not that he chose to abandon me, but like all of a sudden disappeared. I remember the first night when my husband moved out and I was home alone and the kids were upstairs sleeping, and it was the silence of our home, like not hearing my husband's voice or his footsteps through the house, like not feeling his energy. That was like the most excruciating, painful feeling, and it is what I had tried to avoid for as long as I had known my husband, because my dad died and then I met my husband right after, and I feel like our entire relationship I was just like trying to avoid the potential of like losing him too. And so it was like my worst nightmare confirmed, and it reminded me, it was like didn't have words for this at the time, but it was like I was reliving what happened with my dad. All of a sudden, my dad's voice disappeared. Like, I couldn't hug him, I couldn't touch him, I couldn't call him. And so it was painful as hell. And like you said, I would never call either of those situations a blessing, but I ended up becoming so blessed by it. Like how you said that, because it taught me how to go to the root and like really soothe that wound and comfort myself and offer myself what, deeply in my core needs, like I wished I had had when I was 18 and lost my dad, and what I need now, like as a grown woman feeling this same pain. And so I think the biggest thing is it's taught me to like feel through the discomfort. When my dad initially died, it sent me into this decade of just hyperachieving and drowning myself in, work and school and achievements, to anything like to get out of the pain. And, now it's like I'm learning to be comfortable with the discomfort. And I think you said something like that earlier in this conversation. But that really is this like weird trick to minimizing our suffering, is like learning to suffer well, but
yeah.
like laugh along the way too.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I had. I mean, that was like the decision I made, like, cause I went to the hospital. So I saw my dad, and it was weird because like I've seen my other dead, dead people, they don't have you can tell that they don't have a soul anymore. And that's like the weird, eerie part about it, right? Like when they don't, it's like they don't look like them. And it's weird because it's them, but their energy's like gone, right?
Mm,
And so he still looked like him. And so that was super weird. And I like remember in that moment, because I gone through rehab and stuff, and like I was a huge partier. Like there was a fifth, like, and a lot of people even said it. They were shocked by what happened because I could have made a decision to forget everything and numb it out and escape through like drugs and partying. And I chose to just completely change, which I didn't know what that meant other than every natural decision I was going to make. I just had to make the complete opposite because I knew I was like
mhm.
naturally predisposition to fuck up my life,
Yeah.
right? Like I wanted to escape. So anything that was like an escape, I was like, let's do the complete opposite. So I would just I called them like 90-degree choices.
Mm,
Like just go 90 degrees the other way, like anything the opposite. So if it was like, I should go, or it'd be like, I don't want to go for a walk. I'd be like, go for a walk. Or just, I want to sit and cry. And I'd be like, nope, get up and go do something, like, so I started being
mhm,
really proactive, and that's how I like physically reprogram
mm.
myself. Um, and so that's like kind of how I adapted, but that's what threw me into finding all these different modalities and ways to heal, because I didn't want to talk in loops. And rehab is a great thing because rehab makes in the 12 steps, like for me, made me like, you have to make your amends. And these are all great things that like people without being an addict should be doing in their
Yeah.
lives constantly. So I make amends as quickly as I can. If I'm like, I am so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Like, and I make
Yep.
my amends quickly. But it like really just made me very proactive about how is it that I want to show up in the world. And I was looking for anything. And that's how I like got, started doing coaching and spiritual psychology, because it helped me so much in the same way that your tools have helped you. And so you just want to share it with the rest of the world, because it's like, you don't have to live in this
Mhm.
like escapey way. Like you don't have to just numb out your life or just, become hyper focused on achieving, and then nothing will ever affect you because you're going so fast, like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
okay. Like your life can be better if you just slow down. And like
Yeah.
it might be uncomfortable, but I'd rather have a little bit of discomfort than a lifetime of just, numbing myself out and not even being able to like live or like taste or smell or just appreciate stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we've got so much in common because I mean, in high school, typical, I was partying, and I didn't ever do hard drugs. It was like I'd smoke weed and I'd drink with all of my friends, but it was like going more and more down that route. And then it was a 180 when my dad died, and I threw myself super into like church and like was like the best church member, like went overboard. And then this season of my life is like healing from a lot of church trauma and like just a different definition of spirituality, of, what really helps me feel connected to God, not just all of these like rules I've been so good at following all these years to try to feel safe. But especially through the pandemic, like I picked up drinking again because like everyone
Well, that's
was.
girl,
Yeah.
everyone. My friend that was like a liquor sales rep, like they were the ones coming up with those programs to be like, how can we sell alcohol? Because
Mhm.
and they limited the laws. You could take alcohol to go. That hadn't happened forever. Like since
Oh yeah.
prohibition, like
If
they,
you
they
if you
rewrote
weren't
laws so that you could buy alcohol. Like, girl, you're
They
one of
jumped
ever.
on that opportunity.
Yeah.
That was an amazing opportunity for the alcohol industry. But yeah, I totally ended up drinking just so much for years. So between like hyperachieving and work and hustling and then drowning out, every night with alcohol. And I think, did I see sober on your Instagram? Yeah.
Yeah. I am
So,
sober.
so cool. Whole nother conversation, I'm sure, for another time. But yeah, it's been the era of healing my relationship with alcohol too.
So for you, like in alcohol, what does that look like for, because this is just like my assumption, but I'm assuming since you're more self-aware now, are you able to kind of like tap into that? Like when you're like, oh, I want to go drink and you start doing the senses thing. I'm assuming you can
Yeah.
use that if someone's an addict or, struggling with that, or even like food or shopping or whatever, to just kind of like take the step back to reconnect with yourself and understand what's happening in your body and like why you're all of a sudden wanting to shop or eat
Yeah.
or drink.
When I started this like somatic work and the tools I picked up, it did help some, but it was still just so much of a habit. It wasn't like me even drinking to escape anymore because it got to the point where my tolerance was so high that I wouldn't even feel buzzed with like 3 glasses of wine. It was more like my morning coffee. Like this is just tradition and it makes me like
Yeah.
feel good. And so it was just how I had ended my day for so many years. Like I just feel like something massive is going to be missing without ending my day with a glass of wine or 3. And so it helped limit it some, but it was still like my daily, it would be like 1 glass a night and 1 or 2. And so what happened, it was actually like 6 months ago, was I sipped an old fashioned. I was out to Thai with my family and I had this allergic reaction. My throat started to close up. I started to feel dizzy, like my body started to feel weird. And I was like, surely that can't be the alcohol. Like, what is happening? So I tested it the next day, took a sip of red wine, same thing. Next day, took a sip of white wine, same thing. Next day, took a sip of a beer, same thing. I was like, I think like, because I can listen to my body now enough and like know what
The
it's
body
saying.
keeps the score.
Yeah. My body was literally like, we've had enough here. You need to stop. like, it's time to take a break. And so I didn't drink for 3 months just because I was like, I need to trust my body. Like, like it's making it very clear right now. And I experienced what I I was researching and just sharing with my husband, like, I think I'm experiencing some withdrawals here. Like, I feel really like jittery, extra tired, yeah, just really fatigued, super low mood. Like, I noticed a drastic change when I started to eliminate the alcohol. And so now it's like, it just feels like I've gotten to this point where it's a healthy, I'll do it every now and again with friends, but I think I needed that, like, hard stop from something external, and so I literally thank God. I feel like God knew I couldn't do it on my own. He needed to, like, put an external hard stop on it. And so I'm still feeling it out, with, like, will I one day maybe cut it off completely and not even have a sip? I don't know, but this is the healthiest I've ever felt in my life with my relationship with alcohol, and I really like talking about it and having conversations about it, and started listening to, like, sober curious podcasts and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I mean, ultimately, like, our body knows and miracles do happen. Like, that is like the cool thing. And like, once you get in tune with, like, everyone's always like, how do you know if it's your intuition or not? I'm always like, you just gotta listen to it. And like, the more you listen to it, like, because everything's meant for you no matter what. So like, you can't be like, oh, my life got because I listened to my intuition. It's not gonna happen. But like, the more you lean into like hearing it, the easier it is to hear it, right? Like, it's gets louder because you can hear it more
Mhm.
easily. So I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing that like you've had been able to experience that. And I think ultimately, like, I mean, this is like a coaching question, but like, you just got to look at like, what is it that you want to create in your life? Like, what does
Mhm.
it look like? For me, I don't miss alcohol at all. And like, I do love the taste of tequila, but now they have so many non-alcoholic tequilas, so like that's fine. But like, what I miss is the being able to be like, because I live in Nashville, it's very alcohol driven. California, I don't have this problem, but in Nashville I do. Is I wish I could just be like a part of like the social culture. Like, I
Mhm.
can still go out and do stuff, which is
Mhm.
fine. But like, I do kind of feel like I'm not as connected, like people get to have these experiences, but it's like also at the end of the day, I've had hundreds of those partying experiences because I was like a very big addict. Like, I was hard drugs, like
Yeah.
I sold drugs. Like, I've done the most. I don't need to do any more. I don't remember a lot of those stories, but I do kind of miss the camaraderie, I guess, that's around alcohol. And so, but I ultimately look at what's my highest goal. And like, I don't like how it makes me feel anymore. I don't have a healthy relationship. And I do equate that to God too. Like, that is a miracle for
Mhm.
me because I
Yeah.
literally was crazy. Like, that's why people were so impressed. They're like, we're surprised you didn't go on a bender after your dad died and like lose your mind. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not gonna even take offense to that because that would have been really I'm not offended because that would have been really very on brand for me at that point in my life that I would have lost my mind. But I was like, I couldn't afford to. So I had to get my shit together. And ultimately, I became someone, like now looking back, I became someone I never thought I could be. So, like, there's the miracle. And I am
Yeah.
like so grateful that God, like, could utilize something so to happen, like my dad's death, to catapult me into being able to live a life that I really always ultimately wanted to, but didn't really know how to. And that was the catalyst for it. So you can change some
Yeah.
bad into good, like even just like your alcoholic response, like that's
Mhm.
amazing because now you can shift into like, what is it that you want to create with what
Mhm.
is your relationship alcohol want to look like? Like, is it just you drink like the best cocktails at only certain bars that have the best cocktails that you just love and you have one and it's an amazing experience, or maybe it's like a brand of wine or whatever. Like, you get to
Yeah.
make these cool routines out of it, and that's why like the soberish community is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very cool because I've been very black and white. Like, I don't know if you're into the Enneagram, but like I identify with the type one. So like before healing, very black and white, everything.
So
So
you're like, I'm all in or I'm all out.
yeah, normally, but now it's like beautiful and so much more freeing to be comfortable with gray and like sober-ish communities, like where I feel the freedom to figure it out and not have to like jump into a hard extreme because I've done that for so long.
I know. And that's the thing. Like, so I had a huge clientele because I was a hairdresser before. I still do hair occasionally, but um And my clientele was also reliving girls. And at the time I was a huge partier, which now I look back and I'm like, thank you God for that. Because even within any, subculture or whatever within AA, there's like people that are like, you have to go to meetings every day. Like I had this conversation with a girl that always did meetings. I was never a meeting person. I went to a couple, but I worked the steps. I did my thing, but I never was like, I need to go to a meeting every day. Like that is a different culture. And for her, I'm like, her like whole group of people are getting mad at her. Like, why are you not going to meetings every day? Like you're letting yourself down. And I'm like, girl, are you having a problem with, wanting to drink? She's like, no, I don't have any issues. I'm like,
Right.
then I think it's okay that you,
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, but people get so black and white with it. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that crazy. Like
Mhm.
you don't have to like die on that hill again and be like, well, I'm sober. Like if
Mhm.
you want a sip of red wine, you're fine. You're not going to
Yeah.
go lose your mind tomorrow. Like, so you get to choose whatever you want to create. So it's like, what relationship do you want to create with alcohol? Some people, they don't want any. That's cool. Some people just want to drink one like nice tequila shot. That sometimes is me. Like if it's really nice
Mhm.
tequila, I'm going to drink it. Will it
Yep.
take me all night? Probably.
You're gonna have to let me know the alternatives though, because I haven't found great alternatives to alcohol. I've been
Oh,
trying and
there's
shopping
so
around.
many. So there's this one called Ally. It's Allay, and it's wine, but it's all organic. And she has ashwagandha and reishi in it.
Mm.
Yes. Oh, right there. Like, and I wasn't a big wine person before, I quit drinking. But it is really good. So they have a red and a white. And so I can link this in the show notes too for her. She's amazing. It's female owned as well. And you should actually link up with her. She's amazing. But yeah, it tastes great. Like I've had other people taste it and they're like, it's a really good substitute. If that's something that is your thing,
Yeah.
just have it in your refrigerator and maybe like, during the week, that's your wine that you drink. And maybe on the weekends you drink real wine. I don't know. Like you can alternate all this stuff in like, but reishi and ashwagandha, those are great for you. So like,
Yeah, I've been drinking because I have found substitutes now. I've like eliminated caffeine, and in the morning I'll have a Four Sigmatic, like organic cacao mix, and it's got ashwagandha and reishi mushrooms in it. And then at night I've got this like sleepy time latte. So I'm like, okay, I'm finding alternatives. But yeah, if I could find an actually good non-alcoholic wine, I will connect with your girl ASAP.
yeah, I would definitely connect with her. Yeah, I was giving up caffeine. Like I used to smoke a lot of weed too. And I was noticing like I did it after my dad died, mostly because I was so stressed I was just living off cortisol and working out like 3 times a day. Like I was just a ball of
Yep.
manic energy. And I realized I'm like, I don't like this anymore. Like I don't need it. So kind of the similar way with glasses of wine. And then I started stopping smoking weed and I had like vivid dreams again. And I haven't had vivid dreams in years. Like,
That's
isn't that
interesting.
wild? So there's nothing like, and I'm never going to be like, oh, you have to cut that out or whatever. People can do whatever
Mhm.
they want. But like my next thing was caffeine. And like my clients are like, wow, you're really just giving up everything. Like, yeah, let's just see where this world takes me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Nobody recognizes you. They're like, "Who are you?"
I'm like, I don't have caffeine. And they're like, why did you give that up? And I'm like, well, I already have a lot of anxiety. I don't know why I'm feeding myself so much caffeine to add fuel to a burning inferno of anxiety over it. Like, why are we
Exactly.
doing this to ourselves?
Exactly.
Um, Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. You're so amazing. I can't wait for people to connect with you. So what does it look like for someone if someone's like, hey, I want to meet her, I want to work with her? What does that look like?
Yeah, I run a group coaching program called Root to Rise, and it's a 6-month program. I'm sure you'll link it in the show notes, apply just to chat with me, just to see if and how we can support you. And if it's not the best fit, this program, I'll at least point you in the direction of, some resources that will help. But Instagram is where I chat every day, Monday through Friday in the DMs. So you can message me anytime.
Oh, I love that. Okay, well, I'll let you go because I know you've got a little one wanting
I
to
got
talk
my
to
little
you.
son like, "Hi, let
Yeah.
me in."
Yeah, I want to see you. Okay. Well, it was so great connecting with you. I'm just really appreciative that you came on the podcast and it was so amazing. I'll talk to you on Instagram.
I can't wait. Bye, girl.
Okay. Bye, girl.